This video contains topics that some viewers may find distressing. At times, we discuss methods that sexual offenders within the aid sector have used against people who have been struck by disasters or emergencies. If you feel uncomfortable now or at any time throughout the video, do stop watching and contact support channels within your organisation. You are not alone. In this video, we use the terms survivor and victim interchangeably. Hello. As a member of our HR teams, you are a critical part of the Red Cross and Red Crescent community. All of you around the world are working to the same aim, making sure that our national societies have the processes and the people we need to deliver safe and inclusive services which meet our humanitarian standards. Today, we want to talk about a difficult and sensitive issue: sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. All staff should have had the opportunity to watch our video on Psea, which stands for the Prevention and Response to Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. That video sets out more about how to recognise, respond and report incidents and concerns. In this video, we look at the vital role you and your HR colleagues can play. You'll see practical steps that we have developed in conversation with some of your colleagues, and learn more about how the IFRC Psea manual can be used by you and your teams. So why are we having these conversations? Because we know that saying that we will not tolerate abuse has not proved to be enough. Reports of sexual exploitation and abuse, or SEA, continue to surface when and where aid agencies are at work. And if we do not act, people will be harmed and we will lose the trust they place in us. Everyone in the organisation has a part to play, and this is how the HR community can make a key difference. Amina is an HR team member. Amina has heard reports that during an overnight hotel stay, one of our staff invited a sex worker to his room. When the security officer was called and spoke to him, he was angry and said that he could not be stopped as it was his free time. Amina recognises that it can be difficult for security teams and Psea focal points to do their jobs when our personnel say they do not think they are doing anything wrong. Amina knows that even when SEA is not illegal in the local context, our code of conduct makes it clear that it is not tolerated among our personnel. Amina also knows that sometimes aid workers under investigation for alleged sexual exploitation and abuse resign, then move to another aid agency before the investigation is completed. Amina wants to put systems in place to prevent sexual offenders from entering her national society and avoid confusion among personnel about expected standards of behaviour. Amina recognises that people need to know what our standards are for preventing and responding to SEA. Both the IFRC and ICRC have an SEA code of conduct which detail these standards. All national societies can use them to set out minimum standards of behaviour. The codes make it clear that no one connected to the Red Cross Red Crescent movement can engage in any sexual activity with anyone who looks to or benefits from our protection or assistance. Sexual relationships with a member of the affected or vulnerable population are not allowed. Sexual activity with any child or any person under the age of 18 is not allowed, regardless of the age of majority or consent locally. Not knowing the age of a child is not a defence. And that no one can exchange money, employment, goods or services for sex at any time. Use of sex workers is not allowed inside or outside working hours, regardless of what local laws allow. Amina knows that HR can play a big part in making sure that everyone clearly understands our expected standards of behaviour. She makes sure that all personnel sign the Staff Code of Conduct and Psea policy, acknowledging they have read the policies and agree to their terms. Amina also makes sure that Psea is part of induction, along with training which explains how power and privilege can lead to SEA. The briefing also sets out how to recognise, respond and report concerns. Amina also uses the Psea manual to update how candidates are screened. The manual includes guidelines on questions at interview, a police record check, personal reference checks, a legally robust statement of conduct from all employers going back at least 5 years, a personal statement confirming that they do not pose a risk to others and have never been investigated for SEA. Amina and her team are now confident about how PSEA can be part of onboarding, training and screening. But what about our policies? How can HR make sure that our PSEA policies give us the foundation we need to act? Bikram is the head of HR in his national society and knows that SEA cannot be tolerated or covered up. He knows that our national society has expressed support for the commitments of the Pledge on Prevention and Response to Sexual Exploitation, Abuse and Sexual Harassment. This pledge asks all national societies to look at ways to strengthen prevention and response to SEA. Bikram knows that policies have an important part to play, as they can act as the anchor for communication, compliance and consistent decision-making. He recognises that policies are also essential as they enable organisations to hold staff and volunteers to account when they are in breach of a policy they have signed up to. Bikram sets up a working group to develop a PSEA policy. In addition to human resources, the working group includes members from the National Society Leadership Team, Governance, Legal, Security, Operational and Technical Personnel, PSEA, Protection and/or Diversity and Inclusion staff. This brings together the organisational knowledge needed to draft a PSEA policy. The working group sets out key principles and rules of conduct for the PSEA policy. That includes principles of fair and confidential investigation and a survivor-centred approach which avoids doing further harm and includes assistance to survivors and those who have reported a concern. And Bikram and his colleagues also decide whether to adopt the IFRC's Staff Code of Conduct, the ICRC's Staff Code of Conduct, or to develop their own code, and communicate how staff, volunteers and community members may report an SEA incident or allegation, for example, through a confidential hotline or PSEA focal points. Using the guidelines and resources in the PSEA manual and developing a communications and implementation plan for the policy, Bikram is now confident that his national society has the PSEA policy that can help everyone live up to our key commitment to do no harm. As an HR team member, Nora knows that how an incident of SEA is handled can have a significant impact on the survivor, and that if an incident involves a child, there needs to be specialist care in place. Nora is aware that if a report of SEA is made, it could put the survivor and their family or the person who raised the concern at risk. And she knows that if an incident or allegation is made against one of our staff, there is also responsibility to secure their safety. Domestic laws need to be taken into account and physical evidence gathered, in consultation with the legal focal point for the organisation. Nora knows when these complex incidents arise, every member of HR needs a simple plan to follow. Using the PSEA manual guidelines and tools, Nora and her colleagues develop an SEA action plan. The action plan sets out how to respond when there is an incident or allegation. Investigations will be carried out by qualified, objective and experienced SEA investigators. The action plan includes how to assess the safety and welfare of everyone involved in the case, identify referrals to assistance for survivors in consultation with trained protection staff, decide whether to report to the police authorities with legal advice, suspend or transfer the duties of the subject of a complaint with permission of leadership, collect physical evidence, for example phones and laptop, if required during investigation, protect witnesses. As well as securing the safety of the people involved in any SEA incidents, the action plan sets out how to log and track SEA cases, commission an independent investigation, ensure a response which prioritises the well-being of survivors, manage confidentiality, manage investigation outcomes. Nora is confident that the action plan puts the welfare of survivors and people who have reported a concern at the centre of our response. The work that Amina, Bikram and Nora are involved in will prove crucial to us all. They will also report on their work, sharing learning and feedback on best practice with other HR colleagues, ensuring specific confidential information is removed. What Amina, Bikram and Nora do, you can do too. Their hard work is the difference between saying we do not tolerate sexual exploitation and abuse and acting on it. Everyone can access the Psea manual and use its tools and guidelines. And when you understand the critical role you can play in Psea, we all benefit. Your colleagues, our volunteers, and the communities in which we work. Together, we can all make changes to how we work. And together, we can help prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. This is our commitment, but it is nothing without your commitment. Recognise, respond, report.